Good day. Hello to everybody, and welcome to another session on the restoration of families. As you know, this is extremely important, not only in terms of one's own family dynamics, but in terms of one's community, the country, the nation, and of course the world, because family is the smallest unit, but probably the most impactful. So it is also clear that families are really battling. And at the core, we need to restore families in order to see a better world, in order to see a better human being yourself, myself, my family. So, in having to engage these matters in terms of family is probably one of the highest priorities we have. And this is part of an overview in terms of the first subject matter in relation to restoration of families, and that's about the principles of engagement. Because for the family to be restored, we've got to start by just being able to speak to one another, communicate with each other in a way that builds each other, in a way that ensures the right result is achieved, where each family member is grown and where an environment is facilitated where they can be the best they can be, and not in conflict to anybody else, and therefore the best the family in its totality can be. So what are some of these principles that we need to engage? I think one of them is truth. And as you know, the truth must always set the individual free and the people free. So no truth actually holds anybody bondage, but rather liberates one to be the best you can be and the best the next person can be. So truth never impedes the freedom of somebody else. Although it gives you freedom, it never impedes the freedom of somebody else. So the truth must set you free. Of course, there are certain aspects of truth and the definition of truth that we will discuss at a later stage, but I think you will all agree that truth is an essential and a core principle that we must protect, we must live, and we must seek as we engage as family. Of course, very importantly as well, before we even get to the truth, is actually the question of providing an environment that at least we can talk to each other. And that environment must be a safe environment so that each one of our family members are able to talk about anything at any time. And we must provide that safe environment that facilitates that easy discussion between the family. Of course, the next principle is the principle of love. This is core because half the challenge we face when we engage family and each other as family is that we think we're on the opposite sides of each other. We think that the next person is engaging us because they want to harm us. Yet I don't think that is the case. I think every family member sitting around the table has got the interest of the next family member as much as their own interest at heart. The question is, how do we engage matters knowing we're on the same side? And if we're on the same side, it would mean that I should listen to you carefully and you should listen to me carefully because you love me and you have my interest at heart as much as I love you and have your interest at heart. If we are sitting with somebody who does not display that love as a family, we're looking at an issue that needs to be dealt with within their lives where restoration of this love that is naturally there must once again be restored and brought back. So you'll also agree that the question of love needs to be another central theme to restoring family. Another principle is the one of respect. Now, respect is an extremely important principle. Remember, half the challenge we are facing is that we might disagree on a matter. It does not mean that I do not respect the person if I disagree with what they are saying. It just means that I don't embrace what they are saying. But respect the view of the person is critical. Respect the person in their own being is critical. So, as family, we need to separate embracing what the person is saying versus respecting the person and what they say. So, respect again becomes another core principle to ensuring the engagements as family happen in a way that builds everybody. As you know, as a family and as people who love each other, who respect each other, who want to speak truth to each other, want to live truth, and want to seek truth, this journey of failing one another is always going to be there, no matter how hard I might try or you might try. To do the best you can do for your next family member, there'll always be a time when you've tramped a toe that you did not mean to tramp, where you've engaged the matter in a manner that was not appropriate. And that is not because you might have willingly done it. It might have just happened because of circumstances. But knowing the heart of the family, knowing that that member loves you, that knowing that I love you, and when the mistake happens, critical to restoring a relationship would be forgiveness. The ability to forgive. It's not an act. It might result in an act, but we as a family need to have an attitude of forgiveness to each other, where it is natural, where it is easy, where it is not a challenge to forgive because we know the heart of the person sitting across me and across you. So forgiveness is another principle. The principle of grace is also important because if you understand that sometimes in a family, the act that might have been committed by the person is so atrocious that it's difficult to restore them to the position you had held them in the very beginning. It's difficult to actually start to engage them in the way you should be engaging them as a loved one because of the act that they actually committed in the past. So what's extremely important here is ensuring that the principle of grace is always something that needs to be encouraged, always something that needs to be lived to its fullest in order that we can engage any family matter in a way that builds and does not destroy. So grace, for those who might want some definition, although it's discussed a bit later, is actually this that is given to you or me that is not deserved. So if I've offended you to such an extent, your ability to grant me grace would be restoring me to a position where you'd respect, once again, what I'm saying, what I'm engaging with truth, love, and respect. And equally, I would have to do the same for you and to you. Very importantly is also understanding the difference between principles and values. Because many a time I think the challenge happens not because we disagree on a principle, but rather that we may have a different value system of expressing the principle. So a principle, in a sense, is something that's evergreen. It is something that is there for you equally as it's there for me. it applies in the same way. It can never be broken. It can be violated, but it can never be broken because it's the same. It's evergreen for everybody. So the principle of being clean, for example, it's a principle, and nobody would argue with you when you say that things must be clean and tidy. So that principle, nobody will argue with. Neither will they argue with the fact that you need to perform things with excellence. It's a principle. So nobody can argue with a principle. It's equally the same for everybody, and unless you're being unreasonable in your approach to issues. Then it becomes a challenge. But otherwise, for normal people, the principle is the same and remains the same for whether you are black, white, green, black, or otherwise you're 50 years old or 10 years old. It's the same thing. The question is, how do I express that principle? So if you said neat and tidy, what is my expression of neat and tidy? My values of expressing that might be different from yours. And we condemn each other because of our expression of those different values. So we are never really disputing or arguing the principle. We fight because of our expression of different values. Now, values are extremely important to be expressed differently. They also might unite us. In other words, the same values might unite us, but it does not necessarily have to set us apart. Because if you express a different value in a different way, it's my appreciation of you as a person that matters. And if anything, my job is rather to engage you, to hire your values if need be, but never to condemn where you are. It's my living standard that is part of my expression of my values that must encourage you to raise your expression of your values and your standards. But it's not my job to condemn where you are in terms of the expression of that value. And most of us actually go into condemnation when it comes to values. We're not an example of a better value or a better value system. We're rather an example of this, that I want to show you how good I am versus how bad you are. So the difference between principles and values is this, that a principle is constant. A principle is evergreen. A principle applies to everybody at any time, any place, in any way. A value is this, that you are able to express that principle in a manner you deem fit. And my job is to respect you for that. And if I could express the principle in a different way, let me do it in a way that doesn't condemn you, but encourages you, if anything. So we never come round the table to condemn people for the expression of their values, but rather to encourage them that they raise their values if need be. But on a principle, we engage principles that ensures the individual, the family, and society are always protected, and the principle allows for growth and sets them free to be the best they can be. And equally so, the best a family can be. So, as part of our first session, which is about engaging these principles and giving you an overview of what's extremely important to engagements between family, and the principles we need to protect, we need to accept amongst us as core, and ensure that when we engage each other, those principles are never violated, is what the session has been about. And may this encourage you to say that I'm willing, based on these principles, to engage my family. I'm willing, based on these principles, for my family to engage me. And that in it, I may grow. In it, they may grow. And collectively, we may all grow to be this family I so desire to want to be part of. May God strengthen us. May God lead us in the restoration of family, which starts at communication, the ability to communicate properly. God bless you. Amen.